Hey, Travis Crabtree, wait a minute for me. Blah 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 blah. Blah 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 blah. He limps because he once shot a part of his foot off in a boating accident. Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate, stopping on by. This time I'm coming at you to review a movie that I probably saw for the very first time in 2004. I think Keith had this DVD and he showed it to me, and it was like kind of right up my alley because it's like all outdoors in boggy creek areas and stuff. Does this have a year on this? Oh, okay. Maybe that's MM2II. Is that 2002? Very possible. But this DVD possibly came out in 2002 from Sterling Entertainment, and I think Keith shared this with me in 2004, so it would have been the very first time I saw it. I'm coming at you to review The Legend of Boggy Creek. Grr. So it's kind of interesting how Keith in 2004 basically introduced me to this movie. This movie has ties to Keith because 19 years later, he was kind enough to hook me up with the more recent 2018 new HD scan of this film, which for a while the daughter of Charles B. Pierce was putting out. I don't think you can get it anymore. I did see one on eBay, but Keith was able to hook me up with this transfer in a different way. And thank you very much, Keith, if you're watching. But yeah, this is a movie, and I'll tell you what, it's so great to see this finally for the first time, and it's, very widescreen and new HD scan and frickin', better sound. If you look at the Legend of Boggy Creek YouTube page, they showed basically, fade in from the old version to the new version, and both the image and sound is just so amazingly improved. So I definitely would recommend I'm sure there's ways you can see it, if you know what I mean, on the worldwide internet, but definitely recommend the new 2018 HD scan of this film. But this is the first time I'd seen The Legend of Boggy Creek for quite a long time. It definitely played the same way to me that it's always played, which is, with a lot of movies, you're like, when you think of them, you think that they're like the better than they actually are, and you go to watch them and you're like, oh, that's it. So in my opinion, this movie is kind of one of those where you think of it and it's like, oh, that's really, you kind of replay scenes in your head and things. And there are scenes that I like, the Travis Crabtree and the little teenager camping and doing this and that. And there's scenes, I actually like would have liked to have seen more of that, like, guy living out in the woods who accidentally shot a part of his foot off in a boating accident. Like, I'd actually like to see more of that character, because I really envy, that was probably real. I mean, I'd say what you will about the movie and what's, these people's purported, sightings and experiences with the wild man from the woods or whatever, the Sasquatch or whatever, but that guy living out in the woods, that was probably for real. And God, I'll tell you what, that's living, man. I envy that guy to a certain extent. If you didn't know, this movie is based on events, looks like a mystery from the 40s. I don't know if that's true or not, when hunters and ranchers began witnessing, this guy roaming around in Fouke, Arkansas. And what's kind of a bummer about this movie is he didn't have the budget when he did this, because, I mean, Charles B. Pierce, I think he was in advertising, maybe he was doing commercials or something like that, but he just decided, like so many others in advertising, like George Romero and stuff, to let's just make a shot at making a movie. I mean, he's probably had experience with cameras and film and photography and editing and stuff, so much like with what George A. Romero already did in history. He's like, well, let's make a movie. So he basically just made this movie, and I don't think he ever really got distributions, really, per se, or at least not early on. He was just playing it locally himself, and really, really kind of a cool story. And he really got to, applaud people like this who just make a go for it and do it. From what I understand, this is like one of the first, if not the first, like docudrama kind of movies that would be kind of more like fake-ass stuff playing for more or less real kind of stuff, perhaps a precursor to Blair Witch Project, if you will. And watching the film, I think this film was purported to have done a decent amount of business and stuff. Maybe when it did get picked up for distribution, I would imagine, because yeah, he couldn't have done a lot of business just if he was just showing it himself in his own town. So it would have had to got picked up at some point. But apparently, this movie did a decent amount of business and started the whole Bigfoot kind of craze of the '70s. And oh, I forgot to mention, the reason I revisited this is because I recently reviewed The Creature from Black Lake, or whatever the hell it's called. And I mentioned this movie, and it made me want to revisit this movie because I hadn't seen it forever, and I also wanted to experience the 2018 scan, preferably for free. And it's just kind of a bummer that Blu-ray is no longer for sale. But I was going to say I kind of want it, but I don't really need it, and whatever. But it's kind of one of the first movies, if not the first movie, filmed in that docudrama way, where it's kind of basically the movie plays like a documentary, but it's also supposedly featuring some actual people that which makes it, and it probably is featuring just normal not town folk, non-actors, because they're all wooden and stuff. But well, I mean, a movie of this budget, even actors are going to be wooden. But anyway, the movie definitely does have this documentary feel, and that's probably just like with Blair Witch Project decades later, why this movie did as much business as it did, is because people thought probably what they were seeing was actual footage of the wild man, or the Bigfoot or the Sasquatch or the whatever. And so it's basically just a docudrama about just the people's encountering this Bigfoot wild man situation character. And I having revisited this movie, I guess I kind of forgot how, I think the way that the Sasquatch, hairy man, whatever the hell you want to call him, a Bigfoot creature is portrayed in this movie is really well done. I was saying how well done it was in the Creature from Black Lake or whatever, but that's because I forgot how it's relatively well done in this movie as well. So, and the way it's just shot like documentary really gives it that realistic feel to it. But and one thing about this movie, as soon as Keith put it in the DVD in the player, that is in 2004. And it started to play, I'm like, oh, well, this is just like Town That Dreaded Sundown. And I didn't know at the time that it was the guy who'd go on to make that. And it's even got that the same narrator whose voice is very, very, very soothing, or whatever the hell you want to say. He's a good narrator, and he's just some weather. I think he's like was the weatherman in Fouke, Arkansas, or someplace. And he got him to narrate it, and it really gives it this documentary feel. Honestly, revisiting it, even in its HD widescreen glory, I gotta say there's not a whole hell of a lot going on. The best thing about this movie, in my opinion, is just the majority of it takes place in beautiful, rural, small town, frickin' Fouke, Arkansas, and it's just very beautiful, scenery and all this kind of stuff, and a couple really fun hokey ass songs, which reminds me that even though the Blu-ray DVD combo of the new HD scan is, I guess, no longer for sale on the website, what's this movie called? TheLegendOfBoggyCreek.com. On the website, if you go there now, like I'm assuming it's Charles B. Pierce's daughter is in the works to release, probably digitally, I would imagine, the soundtrack, and I'll probably get up on that, honestly, if it's. There's little samples there on the soundtrack page of TheLegendOfBoggyCreek.com, and I'll probably get up on that soundtrack depending on what it costs to download digitally. And I hope I don't know why she isn't releasing it. I mean, if she's got samples of each track, she's probably got each track in its entirety. What's the wait? But there's a couple of famous, infamous songs from this movie. The one that I began the review by singing, and there's some other one I can't remember, something about the tune goes da 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 da. It's like the lonely sad creature song or something. But yeah, the songs have a very much of a late 60s early 70s vibe. Well, imagine that. That's because this movie came out in the early 70s. But Yeah, even back when Keith showed me this, I mean, I gotta, most people would say those songs are pathetic or dumb or loser songs. I mean, I gotta admit, I enjoy the songs, and it's kind of a both, in really in truthful enjoyment, and the other half is tongue in cheek and making fun of the songs. But yeah, I probably definitely, depending on the price and assuming it's gonna be just downloadable MP3 soundtrack for this, I might have to support Charles B. Pierce's daughter and download the soundtrack, assuming she ever releases it. But what can I say? There's not a whole hell of a lot going on. It's very random, just whatever movie. But it does, Oh, one thing one thing I started to say is I don't know if it's true, but it must be true. The back of the this says it takes place in the 40s. Well, what I was starting to say is, his next movie, or one of the movies he'd go on to make, would of course be The Town That Dreaded Sundown, which he'd have enough budget. It's amazing that he had that kind of a budget to get all those old vehicles and stuff for that movie. But what I was saying about this movie is that it's like, if it's supposed to take place in the 40s, I mean, obviously it doesn't. I mean, the movie has this weird thing where it like starts with this young boy running across the field, looks really great in the new 2018 scan, and the narrator is supposed to be the older version of him, kind of like the movie Christmas Story would go on to do, and Stand By Me, and all these movies. But what's goofy is it's like the boy is in the 70s, and when he's older it's the 70s, and so there's like no sense of like actual differentiating in time, because I mean, he had no budget to do a period movie at the time, so I guess maybe the stuff was supposed to take place in the 40s or something. I don't know. It could just be this video distributor's whatever incorrect information. But I think when you watch the movie, there's no mention of like a decade or a specific era that this takes place in. But regardless, when I did watch it, I was kind of like, okay, so the kid is running around in the 70s, and then later on when he's grown up it's the 70s. It's just kind of, obviously low budget movie, hard to get all that stuff perfect or whatever. But it's kind of a bummer, because the movie introduces this little kid, and then you hear the adult version narrator. It's kind of weird, because they introduce this kid and you think maybe the kid's going to be a detail that's going to go all the way through the movie. Well, you just see the kid at the beginning, and I don't think you see the kid again, which it's like, why even introduce the kid? I guess if you're introducing the kid as the younger version of the older narrator, whatever. But in my opinion, it would have been more competent to see the kid periodically throughout the movie. The kid had to have been around so he could recount this stuff as an older version of the, narrating the movie at the end of the day. So it would have been more competent to have the kid, he wouldn't even, he could have just been in certain scenes, maybe he was, I didn't see him, who the hell knows, but have the kid sprinkled throughout, even if it's just in the, once in the beginning like it is, once towards the middle and maybe towards the end or whatever. You don't even have to sprinkle him that much, but don't just show him like at the beginning and never see him again. But that's one of my complaints. I mean, the whole movie's, you can complain about the whole movie and the fact that it's very directionless, but I mean, I guess that's kind of what documentaries are like. They just frickin' start and they say this or that or whatever. One thing I will say about the movie is it does kind of, I guess one of my problems about the movie is throughout the course of it, it really never focuses and just stays on any necessarily group of people or whatever. But that's the one thing I like about the end, where, the last maybe 15, 20, 25 minutes, it does focus on like these two couples that rent this house or whatever, and that's how the movie kind of goes out on an exciting high note, if you will, in the encounter with the creature and stuff. So luckily, even though it maybe kind of trudges on for the first 2/3 of it, towards the end, it does become more of like a movie, in the sense where we're just dealing with these, group of characters and the plight that they're going through with this creature situation. So, yeah, I mean, all I can say is, just the 2018 new widescreen scan of it is just glorious, and like it's just so weird how I didn't look too much into it, but from what I can understand, like she, the daughter of Charles B. Pierce, was handling the 2018 scan and the sales of the Blu-ray DVD combo thing, it's just like her dad was all is like all on her own doing this. Like I don't think she could find a distributor, which is really weird. Do you think, frickin' one of these boutique labels would be interested in picking up? Like she went through the work of having the scan done. It's like you think one of these boutique labels would have been interested in picking it up. It's just so weird how her dad was kind of was all on his own filming it and the early showing it initially, because I think he couldn't get distribution either, and then he just was like, screw it, I'll show it myself. And then I think, when he was showing it himself, it was doing really good, and maybe that's what got him distribution. But it's just a bummer that, you know, that even the Blu-ray DVD combo, like she had to sell on her own and couldn't get distribution. It's just like, what's the big curse with this movie? But whatever. My star rating for Legend of Boggy Creek, I mean, it's not, I guess I can go as high as 2 out of 4, 2 stars out of 4 stars, and most of that is just the beautiful, rural. That's one of them words that's hard for me to say. Rural, just nature of the town and the place where it's filmed at and stuff. Folk me, Arkansas. But yeah, if you like, it's definitely got this great low budget, whatever, early 70s feel. If you like that, and it's really got cool atmosphere and a couple of corny ass songs, and I would imagine the non-widescreen version is probably on YouTube for free. I think how it goes is there's a return to the Legend of Boggy Creek, which I don't think Charles B. Pierce had anything to do with. I've actually got that on a really, really old VHS, so I might watch that VHS. And then I think Charles B. Pierce in the 80s did a Legend of Boggy Creek 2, which I think is on TubiTV.com. So throughout the course of the day or the weeks or whatever, maybe I will watch. I've never seen any of the other ones, so maybe I'll watch the second one, and then the second one, the third one, as it were, and stop on by to share my thoughts on those. But if you like, 70s, early 70s, just, if you're a fan of Town That Dreaded Sundown and somehow you've never heard of this movie, it's the exact same kind of a thing, lower budget, presumably, same narrator. That's the one thing I do like about Town That Dreaded Sundown, is like the narrator guy, and just a really kind of a nice, almost a HAL 9000 voice, Yeah, I mean, the movie doesn't blow your ass off, but I mean, if you're into low budget 70s, independent productions, this might be up your alley. I guess that pretty much does it for my review of The Legend of Boggy Creek. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, we'll catch you on the next video. Hey, Travis Crabtree, wait a minute for me. He once shot a part of his foot off in a boating accident.